Okay, behold the mighty Apple Quicktake 100, Apple's first foray into cameras. This camera dates from about 30 years ago, launched in 1994. I picked this one up a few days ago from somebody who was clearing out a deceased estate. But I did have access to one back at the time that my uncle used to have. Now, I've already taken this one apart once, because when I got it, the front was off a little bit and you couldn't turn it on because of that. And the little status LED plastic had come out of it. So I've already taken it apart once, but when I did that, I found that there were no actual videos on how to take the thing apart. So I'm making this one to show you how to get into it. So let's get started with the obvious ones. So this screw on the back, on the bottom, doesn't do anything. However, the one in the corner here is part of the assembly for the system. So I'll take this one out now. This was made in Japan, and so I suspect many of these are JIS head screws, and so they don't exactly fit, but one of these drivers, but it's pretty close. Next one to remove is inside the battery compartment. Now, the reason that I'm taking this out is that the batteries that I've put in don't work, because the previous batteries had been in there for probably since 1996, and they had leaked. So I was able to get it started using the external 7.5 volt power adapter, which is the same as the ones for PowerBooks of the era. I didn't actually use a PowerBook one because, well, the PowerBook adapters that I've got need repairing as well. That's a story for another time, but I did have a regular one that I was able to use. So I was able to turn this one on, and I found that there were actually photos still on here from 1995 and 1996. Okay, next screw to remove to take it apart is this one here, just inside the battery bay. And we'll take this one out. There's another screw in there which holds in the black plastic that is used to help get the batteries out. As you saw, that doesn't really help all that much, but it's better than nothing. And then the final screw for removing it is just here next to the eyepiece. So with this, you start getting inside the shell of the camera. And I think the story was that this was OEM'd by Canon for Apple. So it's designed by a camera company, which is a little bit interesting. So with that done, we've got all the screws off for getting access to the first level of the system. And then it's a matter of popping apart the plastic here. Because I've been in recently, it's a little bit easier. And you can see this one broke slightly, but there's a few clips around the edge of the system, and you get in there and pop it up. The other reason that I'm taking this apart is that I was able to take some test photos with it, and they look awfully green. Now, as part of taking it apart, I did disconnect this one here, which underneath you can see says that it is for the CCD. So I'm wondering if perhaps some of these connectors got a bit dirty, so I will take care of them when I put it back together. So next thing to do is to remove this one here, and it's interesting that this one is labeled as the MCU, the main control unit. So don't know what this board does. It has got connections to the battery socket here, which is something that I'll be looking at soon, and also to a number of other connectors here. It's not the connection to the little control board at the back though, which is interesting. So I'll remove that, and then we'll remove the screws that go into the top PCB here. So I was motivated to make this video because I couldn't find any take aparts for this, and taking it apart is about the only thing that this is good for right now. I have got visions of, you know, putting a Raspberry Pi or something inside there and turning it into a reasonable camera, because This took photos that were 640 by 480, and you're like, I mean, that's not great by modern standards. It's like they were 640 by 480 and they were bad. So putting in context, Canon released their first consumer digital camera a few years after this one, the Canon DC-20. I've got one of those as well. And it's awful, and it's better than this one. So this was the first of, consumer cameras from a company like Apple. So I'll just open this one up and we can see what's inside there for now, because it is soldered onto the rest of these cables. So the photos that were on here were dated from 1995 and 1996, and because it came from a deceased estate of somebody that I don't personally know, I won't be showing them, but I'll put some other photos up later on that I took with a Quicktake 100 back in the day. And if I can get this one taking photos again, I will show some of the more modern ones too. And I think from memory these were a different size too. Yay. Of course, for the time, this has got a passive viewfinder, so the viewfinder doesn't have any sort of digital display in there. It's literally just an optical path that gives you an approximation of what the imaging sensor would pick up. There was a little bit of dust and other gunk in there, but it's not too bad. You can see there's another screw that does it hold that into the bottom. I would say that yes, it does. So I'm going to remove that one down there. The other reason for making a video like this is that I can go back and look at what I recorded to put it back together. Now, I mentioned that my uncle had one of these when I was growing up, and he moved recently, and I did ask him to look for it, and I'm not 100% sure if he found it or not. So I may have access to yet another one of these. So if I do totally screw this one up, it's not the end of the world. Now, this front fascia is a separate piece of plastic, which I found out when I needed to get it back into place. But exactly how it's in there, I'm not 100% sure. So make sure we won't lose that. I have had some inspiration, and I'm wondering if maybe the screw that I said wasn't important on the bottom was in fact important to remove this from the chassis. So let's take that out and see how this goes. What about now? No. So we've got looseness there. Oh, hello. What's going on here then? This had to have been put together somehow, so it must come apart somehow. I do wonder about what all these wires do. I mean, obviously it's a fairly simplistic question for somebody who's attempting to repair a camera, but I've been fiddling around with this and I'm not any closer to actually getting it apart. I wonder if this door comes out easily. Doesn't really look like it. So I am going to remove this one wire there, which should give me access to what's underneath. I have a nice temperature controlled soldering iron, and I'm going to put some flux on here because it's 30 years old, and old solder, you never know. Even though this will be leaded solder, so it should be pretty amenable to being resoldered later on. So let's, okay, there's that off. Smells like dead fish, love it. So with that wire removed, let's try flipping this over and see what we get. Yes. We get a whole bunch of stuff that makes me go, what on earth is this doing here? Like, what is this thing? Okay, so that black wire there actually wasn't from the battery, it was for ground. So that's good. All right, what else have we got in here? So I removed that screw fairly recently in terms of, taking stuff apart. What other screws can I see? Okay, I can see one there. So let's see what's under there. So there's some people who are like, why are you taking so long doing this? Like, because it is a 30-year-old piece of electronics with no manual. So I do want to be able to understand what goes where when it comes time to actually putting it back in. So gently does it. Okay. Good-o. There's another screw. Interesting, this screw seems to be under a fair bit of tension. I wonder if that's because it's the last thing holding it in place. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? It's interesting that this LED, there's like 4 wires going to it. I probably should have done this a while ago. I'm just going to undo these straps. Stop it wiping screws everywhere. Thinking. I wonder. Yes, okay. So we've got the door out. Now what happens? Aha. Aha. So I'm just removing a screw that holds a little switch in place for the front door. There we go. That's the last bit of the case off. So we can see that this was made in 1993, December. What was I doing 1993 December? I was in grade 9. So despite this being a digital camera, it actually has a mechanical shutter. And, frankly, I already think that I'm going to not know where all the screws are to put it back together, but that's okay. Like, it's not great, but it's okay. So this is the back panel board, and if I were building new cuts for it, I would actually want to continue having that around because, there's no particular smarts on here. Just something for driving that LCD and a couple of buttons. So, yeah. Okay, well, as all the car manuals say, installation is the reverse of disassembly. So let's get this back together again and hope for the best. Some isopropyl alcohol. I'll probably do that another time before I actually finish it. Okay, where do we go next? Okay, those ones I know are from the top of the board. This is an external one. What else have we got in here? I don't think I even found what was doing the power distribution for this device. I suspect it was probably what was inside that metal can under here. But, I don't know. Does it come off easily? No. Oh well. Keep your secrets. And we will screw that switch back in place. So it's open right now. When it's closed, that's down there. No, I actually don't like how rough that is. Should I do anything about it? Can I do anything about it? If I was going to do anything about it, now would be the time. Alright. Disassemble this and relube that switch mechanism, or clean it out or something. I suspect there's something in there that ought not be re-wet the lithium grease, hopefully. It's my intention anyway. You can clean the inside and the outside at any time. It's the inside I really got to get clean now. So when this goes all the way there, this will be under tension normally from the micro switch, except when it's there. And then when it closes, the end of that track, I think, pushes the micro switch back. So let's hope that's how it works. Okay, so let's just check that the optics on the front of this are pretty clear. I don't love the way that the CCD sensor looks. Give that a bit of a clean, although I could do that at any time because there isn't a piece of plastic over it or anything. So that's of course why it doesn't look super clean. Okay. Yeah, so this switch is spring loaded as well, which is how it pushes things into place. And of course the easy way to get it back in is take these screws out and then put it on flat and then assemble the front panel. Close that mechanism, switch is inactivated. Open that mechanism, switch is activated. Yep, I'm happy with how that works. Okay. From memory, I think this was about $700 or $800 Australian when it came out in 1993, which adjusted for inflation is probably like, I don't know, $2,000 or $3,000 by today's standards. It was not a cheap camera. Okay, now we get to put it all back actually in the case. So, going back to Steve's quote, everything was made by somebody no smarter than you were. But their experiences are what has led them to be able to do the things that they're able to do. And the experience, in the case of, I'm going to say it was Canon again, I might be wrong, it might have been Fuji that made this. But their experiences were of making video cameras. So they knew things that worked for video cameras and things that didn't work for video cameras, and they applied them to this to make a premium product for Apple. So here we are 30 years later, taking the thing apart and reveling in its complexity. I mean, honestly, I would have preferred that it wasn't this complex, but what can you do? All right. So for various reasons, which amusingly I still can't disclose, I had access to Apple's internal network from time to time. Nothing illegal on my part, just somebody who gave me some access I probably shouldn't have had. And there were all sorts of open file servers around, and I remember finding a marketing one which had images of this device before it was announced to the public. And so I remember finding this in an Apple share and opening up the press images of it and being amazed by the design of it. So this has lived in my head for 31 years now. So I'm a big fan of this thing, right? Yeah, so that's why I'm going to all of this effort to put this thing back together, because I don't want to destroy it. And That's why I have hopes and dreams of putting a Raspberry Pi or some other camera guts inside one day, so that, you know, you can hold it and take photos. Now, have I got an iPhone 16 that I'm recording, iPhone 15 that I'm recording this on? Yes, absolutely. And it's going to be a better camera than anything that I could ever put inside this. But, you know, there's the nostalgia factor here, which should not be underestimated. Before I get too much further, I should probably resolder that ground connection that I took off earlier. This is a handy dandy little T12 battery powered soldering iron, and it is literally the best soldering iron that I've ever used. I used to work at a university, and for various reasons, despite being a systems administrator there, several members of my team used to be printer repair people, and we had a workshop which had, you know, Weller soldering stations and all the goodies, and this is better than those ones. So it's interesting the things you find sometimes. All right, so that's back in place. A few blasts of IPA onto this and clean up the rosin from the, well, not rosin, the flux, I guess, that I used earlier when I desoldered it. And hopefully that's all okay. Now, do I need to assemble it further to try it out? No, I guess not. So I should be able to put some batteries in it now and just turn it on and see how it goes. And we'll open it up and see if it makes the shutter noise. And it doesn't. That doesn't really surprise me. I will put in the plug pack that I was using earlier, and I'll see if that makes it come alive. If that doesn't, then I've broken it. But yeah. No, it wasn't turned on. There we go. So it's still alive, which is good. Take a photo. So that's good. And I think before I close it up, I'm going to plug it in via a serial port, and I'll see if the photos that it took still have a weird green cast to them. CCDs can delaminate. There were a lot of digital cameras from 10 years after this one, which have had that problem where basically they just stopped taking viewable photos. And yeah, so early CCDs, not the most reliable things on earth. But so to actually get the photos off here, they're not a defined, standard that anybody uses anymore. They're not JPEGs, they're their own compression format, and you've got to install custom software and custom QuickTime drivers, and it was a whole palaver. But I was able to view the photos that were already on there. So I'm just going to pause this, I'm going to check the photos, and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. So I've determined that it can still take photos. Unfortunately, the photos are just as bad as they were beforehand. On the plus side, they're no worse, but they're no better either. So it was a interesting bit of exploration. I've tried re-cleaning that a few times and it hasn't got any better. It doesn't seem to be taking blue. So I took a photo of some nice red containers that I've got here, and it picked up the reds just fine, and my green bottle of isopropyl alcohol, perfect. My blue watergrass, no, that's all black. So yeah, my guess is that the CCD in this is gone. And like I said, this is something that has happened to many early digital cameras because they're just not you know, they weren't made to last that long to begin with, and they have lived out their life, and the components have failed. So this makes this a perfect candidate for actually putting some new guts in one day, but that will be quite some way down the track. I determined that the batteries are not currently working, so I'm going to have a little bit more of a look there. I was quite happy with the deep connector here, but maybe the one on the other side not so much. I mean, there's still a fair bit of corrosion on that one, so I'm going to give it another little run through with this abrasive brush. I was using it earlier, I didn't talk about what it was, but basically it's just files the copper sulfate or whatever it is off the terminals here. That's the idea anyway, which should make things conductive again. But we shall see about that. Process of looking at this. Can you see here? This bit of metal is pretty much broken. And I think if I bend it too many more times, it's going to be the end of that. The acid from the battery that leaked in there probably has weakened it a fair bit. Because that's just not that's not providing enough of a contact to make a circuit, and I don't think that that's going to work like that again. But it works on mains, so I know that the guts of the camera are actually fine. So at this point, I'm just going to finish putting it back together, and then it will go into my cupboard of shame. No, not exactly cupboard of shame. Wasn't my fault. And then we'll revisit it at some point in the future, potentially, to put some new guts inside it. So, in answer to the question of how you take this apart, we had it at the beginning. Take some screws out of the bottom, take the screws out of the back, take the screw out of the battery bay, this comes apart. Next step, remove those two screws, remove that screw, that screw, that screw, that screw, desolder that black wire, that flips up, that gives you access to another two screws down there, and then from that point you should just be able to lift the inner assembly out of the grey plastic outer shell. What you do then is your own business. As shown here, this is a non-trivial device to actually look at. It's remarkably complex inside, but it was, one of the first consumer digital cameras. Put this back together, do a hero shot, and that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Feel free to ask any question you want in the comments.